You may be seated. Wouldn't it be nice if life came with a reset button? Because we all say stuff and do stuff that we wish we could take back and do over. You get up in the middle of the night, you stub your toe on the way to the bathroom, rewind and try again. You spill breakfast on your shirt, hit reset, start over. You back into the mailbox on your way out of the driveway. Reboot the day and hope it goes better next time. Forget your homework, step in doggy doo, drop something important and breakable, say something stupid, and just yell, do over, and you get another chance. You get the picture. Wouldn't it be nice if life had a reset button, a rewind switch, the option of turning it off, turning it back on, and rebooting it? The chance to yell, do over, and try again. The good news is, with Jesus, you do get that chance. When we follow a guy who rose from the dead, which has to be the biggest do-over in history, we shouldn't be surprised that as his family, we get the same grace. Jesus offers himself to us as our reset button, our rewind switch, our reboot, our chance to start over. Jesus says today in Revelation, I'm the Alpha and the Omega. Now, Alpha is the first letter of the Greek alphabet, and Omega is the last letter of the Greek alphabet. And when Jesus calls himself the Alpha and the Omega, he's saying, I'm everything from A to Z. You know those Amazon boxes you get that have the little smiley thing that goes from A to the Z in Amazon? That's what that means. Amazon will sell you anything from A to Z, and Jesus is at least as good as Amazon. And he often gets here sooner than 2 days. It means he's the beginning and the end, which makes Jesus Lord and in control of all of our beginnings. And that's a good thing, because if we're honest, we don't always start out strong, do we? There's always a learning curve anytime we try something new. Now think about how you learned how to talk. You made random noises until some of them sounded like words. That, ma, da, and your parents went nuts and got excited, and so you made the same sounds again and again until it turned into language. Now, we don't have any babies in here right now, but I can tell you what happens. Every time a baby gets to be about 4 or 5 months old and they're in here, they discover the echo. And they go, ah, ah, ah. They do it every time. So when you hear a baby do that, they're learning how to talk. They're going through the learning curve. How did you learn how to walk? By falling down enough times to learn how not to fall down. All while having our families holding our hands and cheering us on and picking us up off the floor and setting us back on our feet and trying to protect us from bashing our brains out on the furniture. We don't always start out strong, do we? We begin walking and talking by falling down and spouting gibberish. But when we're babies, people give us another chance. They cheer us on, they encourage us to try again. But let us, as grown-ups, garble a word or mix up a sound or trip and fall. And what do people do? Or let us say or do something stupid or embarrassing, and nobody lets us forget it. We get branded as that idiot who let a cuss word slip, or who tried and failed, or as doubting Thomas, whom we heard about today. And Thomases all over the world are cringing at this. And in Church of the Messiah, you cannot throw a brick without hitting a Thomas. And so Thomas, whom the Bible reports as insightful and courageous and honest on other occasions, but who is remembered for only one thing, doubting that Jesus rose again from the dead and wanting to see merely what Jesus had already shown everybody else on Easter morning: his hands and his side and his body. Babies always get a do-over. Children usually get to rewind and try again. Teenagers sometimes reboot. But grown-ups, we don't get to hit the reset button, do we? Not unless we're in the witness protection program or move 2 or 3 states away. That's why it's good to invite Jesus into your life, because as Alpha, he's Lord of our beginnings. And if we don't start strong, if our beginning is bad, if we garble our words or we fall down as we try to walk, he always gives us another chance. Because even as grown-ups, we are his children, and he lets us reset and try again. God's mercies are new every morning. Look at the disciples and how they began on Maundy, Thursday after the Last Supper and on Good Friday. And when Jesus asked them to pray with him in the garden, they fall asleep. When the soldiers show up, they run away. When he's pushed and shoved through the streets and nailed to a cross, only one of the 12 are there with him to support him. And even though Jesus told them over and over again, we're going to Jerusalem, they're going to arrest me, they're going to kill me, when it actually occurs, they're clueless. He told them over and over again he would rise from the dead. But early Easter morning, when the women come from the tomb, ecstatic at seeing the risen Lord, they don't believe it. And even when he shows up in their midst, they don't believe it till he shows them his hands and his side and touches them personally. And how about that Thomas? He was somewhere else that morning. He missed the show and didn't believe it when the guys told him what they'd seen and touched. Pretty shabby beginning for all of them. Now, it's a good thing Jesus gave them another chance the next week. That time, Thomas was there, which is how we know that he was not an Episcopalian. He missed church on Easter, but he was there the week after. Now, what if Jesus had treated them like we often treat each other? Sorry, guys, you blew it. You losers slept through our prayer time in Gethsemane. You ran away. You let me die alone. You blew off the women when they told you the truth. And Thomas, oy vey, Thomas, you want proof I'm real? How about a kick in the pants? In fact, why don't all of you just line up and bend over and we'll have a keister parade? But that's not what Jesus did. Jesus, the Alpha, the Lord of our beginnings, let them hit the reset button and begin again. He gave them a do-over, just like he does us. And the next time they faced difficulty, they did better. We heard that in the lesson from Acts today as Peter and the guys stand up to the very people who sent Jesus to the cross. The religious leaders arrest them, order them to quit talking about Jesus, and Peter, the same guy who early Friday morning denies knowing Jesus, that he knows Jesus 3 times, and who wouldn't believe the women when they came back from the tomb on Easter, Peter looks them in the eyes and says, I don't care what you say. I'm going to do what God says. Okay, which ones were the real disciples? Those losers on Maundy, Thursday, Good Friday, and early Easter, or the guys who turned the world upside down through their commitment to Christ? Which one's the real Thomas? The Easter Day doubter, or the one a week later who falls on his knees and says, my Lord and my God? They both are. They all are. We all are. Because when we start poorly, Jesus lets us start over. When we begin badly, Jesus lets us begin again. He's the Lord of all our beginnings, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And when our beginning is bad or ugly, he gives us another chance. As the Alpha, Jesus is the Lord of all of our beginnings. And as the Omega, he's the Lord of all of our endings. Jesus knows how history turns out. If you read Revelation, you get a glimpse of how it all ends. And spoiler alert, God wins. Jesus is the Lord of the ultimate end of the whole world and human history, but he's also Lord of each of our individual ends. And not only how our life will end and when, because we're all going to die, right? Jesus is Lord of not only how and when our life will end, but also every ending in our life. And when anything ends badly in our life, whether due to our own mistakes and poor choices, or by somebody else's doing, or simply by bad luck, when things end badly in our life, Jesus is there with us, hanging on the cross, showing us how badly his life ended. Wait a minute. He's not there. That's because Jesus' death was not the end. Now, it seemed to be that way on Good Friday, but that was only an interruption on the way to the ultimate end in Revelation, an interruption over which Jesus was Lord, just like he's the Lord of all the little endings in our lives. As we experience them on our way to the ultimate end, when Jesus comes again in glory to judge the living and the dead, and eternity begins. The good news is, the things that often feel like the end in our life, they aren't. They're just little Good Fridays with Easter coming soon. When we feel like our life is at the end, whether it's by disease or disability or disaster or divorce or death, let's remember Jesus is not only the Alpha, the Lord of our beginnings, he's also the Omega, the Lord of our endings. And the only end that is really the end is the end in the very end. Now, you've heard it ain't over till the fat lady sings. It ain't over till Jesus comes again. Wouldn't it be nice if life came with a reset button, a rewind switch, the option to reboot, the chance to yell, "Do over"? Well, with Jesus, it does. Because he's the Alpha and the Omega. He's the Alpha, the beginning, the Lord of all of our beginnings, who when we begin badly, lets us reset, rewind, reboot, who gives us another chance to start over and try again. And he's the Omega, the Lord of all of our endings. And when it looks like things are turning out badly, and Jesus reminds us what seems like the end isn't. It's only an end. And an interruption on the way to the end, when Jesus comes again in glory to judge the living and the dead, and his kingdom will have no end. When our day or any part of our life begins badly, when we start slowly, when it seems like we're never going to get this project off the ground, when we wish we could stop and yell, "Do over," let's do just that. Let's let Jesus be Lord of our beginnings. Let's ask him to dust us off and stand us up on our feet and try again. And when our day or any other part of our life ends badly, when things fall apart and it looks like everything's all over, and when we wish we could stop and yell, "Do over," let's do just that. Let's let Jesus be Lord of our endings. And remember that no matter what happens or how bad things look, it's not the end. That comes later. And whatever looks bad now is just an end, an interruption on the way to the end when God wins.